But I would like to remind, or I'd like to remind everyone that while we're talking about white supremacy, Miss Spittleneck, you were talking about white supremacy.
It's Spitalnik.
Oh, I apologize, Spitalnik. Miss Spitalnik, while you were talking about white supremacists and abortion, I totally agree with you. There's a lot of white supremacists in the abortion movement and abortionists because they have murdered over 20 million black babies in America since Roe versus Wade in 1973. That's on average 900 black babies are aborted. They're ripped apart inside their mother's wombs. So I would agree with you. That could be labeled white supremacy, or we could just label it murder. And it should never be happening. So if you want to talk about white supremacy and the abortion movement, you should really analyze that in your human rights groups that you run as you collect donations from people with your nonprofit. Because I think that is something extremely important to talk about, is the right for those black babies to have lives as American citizens, the right for them to be born, the right for them to be given a chance to live as free Americans instead of murder. You think this is funny, Ms. Spitalnik? Is this funny to you? Is babies being murdered in the womb funny to you? Because you're smirking and laughing at me right now.
What's not funny are the black people and Hispanic people and Jewish people and Muslim people who have been murdered in synagogue, in church, in supermarkets, in mosques by white supremacists.
Are you aware that all colored people are murdered? That is a fact, that every single color person has been murdered. That's not unusual. It's not just that people of color are murdered. White people are murdered too. Murder is not just for minorities. That may be a shock to you because you seem to dive deeply into all kinds of misinformation and seem to be uninformed yourself. But if you're going to talk about white supremacy and abortion, you need to study very hard about who the targets are. And it's not just black women, and it's not just black babies, it's Hispanics as well. And I think that's important for you to understand. And if you apparently care about human rights and you care about studying extremism, let's have a little talk about extremism, shall we? I think that's important because that's what this hearing is all about. I'd like to inform you, or maybe you don't know, maybe you do know, I doubt it. You mostly care about white supremacists and white-wing extremism. But there's quite a pattern of left-wing violent protests on college campuses today. Miss Gaines here was a victim of it. Do you support what they did to Miss Gaines? These trans terrorists chasing her into a room, do you support their movement?
I am absolutely sorry that Ms. Gaines felt threatened and unsafe while she was on a college campus, and that's not acceptable. But again, the statistics tell us that when it comes to politically motivated violence, in 2022, every single murder was committed by a right-wing extremist.
Every single murder in America was committed by a right-wing extremist?
Every single politically motivated murder was committed by a right-wing extremist.
Are you sure about that?
I am.
Are you aware that the Tennessee shooter just recently identified as a man and she was a biological woman? Was she a right-wing extremist as well?
Young lady's time has expired. I'll allow the witness to answer the question.
So that was a shooting that happened in 2023. There is no evidence as to what ideology motivated that shooting. And what we do know is that cisgender males are responsible for the vast majority of mass shootings in this country.
I'm sorry, I don't know what a cisgender male is. There's only two genders. It's male and female. That would be that. So no one knows what a cisgender male is. It's a made up.
Unfortunately,
idea.
the anti-trans invasion.
Georgia, yield back. I recognize.
Get the fuck out of here, bitch! Oh!
They say that America is divided politically, and we kind of agree. There's the dumb, and then there's us.
Oh, I'm sorry. Was that too harsh for the little snowflakes?
This is Right, Left, and Center. This is Right, Left, and Center. No matter what's going on in today's news, politics, social, environment, culture, we're talking about it unabashedly. Real, raw, direct, and funny. Let's rock. This is Right, Left, and Center. And this is your host, Will Jackson.
Get the fuck out of here, bitch!
Did that wake you up? That crazy bitch, Margie Taylor Greene. Oh my Lanta. I started a little early, folks, so I hope you got yours because I got mine. And we're going to talk about a few things this week. I want to talk about gun violence. Of course, you know, Margie Taylor Greene, Trump, and his little minions in Pickens, South Carolina. I also want to talk about Tim Scott's punk ass and the Honorable Senator from New Jersey, Cory Booker. I think he's from New Jersey. Someone corrects me, but. And then also the conservative side of me wants to talk about the asylum seekers. So before we dive into this, I need to take care of a little business here in the beginning. So, you know, I did start a GoFundMe page, as I mentioned in my last episode, for folks to donate to our podcast to help us get more and bigger and better equipment. And you will find that link under the description of the title of this cast. If you want to donate, great. If not, great. Whatever you can help, we're halfway there on our side. Just need a little bit more assistance. And I hope you guys are able to assist me. But if not, once again, I got the greatest listeners in the world. So let's talk a little bit about Margie Taylor Greene. Get the fuck out of here, bitch. This chick, man, you know, she got kicked out of the Freedom Caucus, okay? They voted her ass out, mainly because, you know, and I mentioned on a previous episode that she got into it with Lauren Boebert on the House floor and called her a bitch. And probably Lauren Boebert wouldn't start crying and shit. And they were already fed up with Margie Taylor Greene's ass anyway. So we already know that. And they definitely didn't like the fact that she backed Kevin McCarthy. Okay. And the Freedom Caucus really didn't care for Kevin McCarthy. In fact, they were the ones trying to hold things up for Kevin McCarthy, if you remember. Nevertheless, excuse me, sinuses again. Nevertheless, that's why she was booted. That was the final straw. And if that was the final straw, why couldn't anything else be the final straw? I mean, this chick has said that a plane didn't crash into the Pentagon. He said the virus was a hoax. Said that one government official slept with a Chinese spy. I mean, the list goes on and on and on, from climate change to President Joe Biden and Hunter Biden and et cetera. I mean, this chick, Georgia, if you do not vote her out 2024, I'm going to tell you something. The Georgians in her district, if you don't vote her out, I'm going to tell you something. It says a lot about your character. It really does. And that's not of a good standing, to be placed in the character of someone who is so damn delusional, alleged adulteress, and just can't seem to take a firm grasp on life. You know, you remember when she went to New York, when Trump was being arraigned in New York in the Alvin Bragg investigation, and she thought she was going to go up to New York and do what she does in all the deep states. And remember when I told you New Yorkers was going to run her ass out? Well, guess what? She didn't get to say one damn word before she was hustled out of there. And all the folks that are in the LGBTQ communities, you should be very offended. Black folk, Asian folk, Hispanic folk, Native American folk, you should be very, very, and I mean very offended by her words. The thing is this. I don't care what your religious beliefs are. Okay? It doesn't have a place in politics. That's my opinion. What I do believe is that a human being is a human being, no matter what direction in life they decide to go. Your religious beliefs in the political system, in the political world, has no room, none whatsoever, zero. Okay? So if you have a religious belief, then you know what? Bring prayer back to the schools. If it's that damn important to you, bring prayer back into our public school systems. Do that. Other than that, keep your shit in-house. Do not put it on a political platform. You know what? And I'll get into that piece when I start talking about a little about the gun violence. You know, but before we even get in that arena, I just want to throw a fact out there for you. Did you not know that 65% of Americans, and I'm going to go back to the last week, that chick with the fabricated, or hell, I don't know what it's called. It's the Supreme Court what if case. You know, 65% of Americans said that she was wrong and she should have never brought that case in front of the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court should never even took that case. And that 65% also said that businesses should not refuse service to transgenders. Let me say that again. Business should not refuse services to transgenders. Now, I said this before. Now, what if you go into a shop and you're Asian, or you're a biracial couple, or you're a biracial individual, or you're a black person, and you go into a shop and someone believes that blacks are inferior, interracial couples should not be, and that's their belief, and that's their belief in freedom of speech, and they don't need to serve you. How's that working out? How would that actually work out in America? Young voters, 2024, we need you. And here's a reason why we need you. Here's a reason why we need you. We've got politicians like Tim Scott. Now, I'm not going to play Tim Scott because he's what I call a Tom. And he's a piece of shit from Florida, just like DeSantis. And my Floridians, listeners, my loyal listeners in Florida, know that I do not, encompass what you do in Florida with these two assholes and the orange man that lives down there whose ass is going to go to jail because of 37 counts. And, let me not forget this individual, Walt Nada. Man, if someone's around Walt Nada, take the advice of all the legal scholars that are out there that's been on MSNBC, CNN, PBS, Fox. The list goes on and on. Run. Take a deal and run. Because if you don't, you're going to get thrown up under the bus. Because you set your ass up for plausible deniability when it comes to the orange man. That's what you did. And yet Walt Nada's walking around still having lunch with this cat. And the judge said, you guys can't talk about the case. Well, guess what? I guarantee you they're talking about the case. I guarantee they're talking about the case. So I didn't mean to get off track on that, but that was just like unbelievable. But nevertheless, young voters, 2024, we need you at the poll. And so here's the reason why. So as I was saying before, Tim Scott, piece of shit, congressman from Florida or senator from Florida who's now running for president has no chance whatsoever. Who also got booed on The View. And I applaud Whoopi Goldberg for saying we do not do that on this show. No matter what you believe, you do not do that on the show, but he did deserve to get booed. But I do applaud Whoopi for stepping in and shutting it all down, along with the rest of the View cast. But Tim Scott believes that there is no oppression in voting laws in the South. He does not believe that there is a Jim Crow 2.0 happening down south. Well, guess what? That incensed my man Cory Booker. And this is what Cory Booker had to say.
Madam President.
The senator from New Jersey.
I have deep and tremendous respect for my friend from South Carolina. I'm not a senator from the South, but my family hails from the South. From Monroe, Louisiana, to Alabama, to North Carolina. I know my roots, and I know the challenges of Jim Crow, and thank God we are not in a time of Jim Crow. The history that my friend talked to, I know this history, and I know my colleagues in the Senate know this history. We're all not blind to what happened in terms of racial oppression going back to the founding of this nation. The Constitution that people have been waving around, it's hard not to read that and not see that many of the compromises were based upon an acquiescence to that original sin of this nation, in slavery. We know the violence of what he said and talked about. I'm frustrated that we can agree that there has been overwrought language on both sides of the political aisle around this issue, but we should be focusing on the facts. I have a hard time listening to people that want to talk about this issue and don't talk about facts. In the United States today, it is more difficult for the average African American to vote than the average white American. That is not rhetoric. That is fact. We know that black voters, on average, are forced to wait online twice as long as white voters. We began this session today swearing an oath to that flag, saying that this would be a nation of liberty and justice for all. Where is the justice in a nation that there is, on average, for a black person, twice as long to vote? It's factual, but let's keep going, because I heard my colleague speak. During the 2016 presidential election, residents of entirely black neighborhoods waited to vote. They were 74% more likely to spend more than 30 minutes at their polling place relative to residents of entirely white neighborhoods. That's a fact. Similar racial disparities were observed right before the pandemic. In the 2018 midterm elections, a Brennan Center report found that Latino voters waited almost 46% longer than white voters, and black voters about 45%. The report also found that Latino and black voters were more likely than white voters to wait in the longest of lines on election day. You could go into state after state and you will see who waits factually on longer lines. Georgia. Are we going to reduce this to just being about water? I find that law offensive, but that's not the thing that offends me most. You want to know what's going on in Georgia right now? They have a historical pattern of dwindling polling places in the diverse areas, with some voters in Georgia waiting up to 10 hours in predominantly black neighborhoods. Think about this for a second. You want to talk about voter suppression? You're working a job, you're taking care of young kids, and you're going to give up a day's salary in Georgia to vote? You want to talk about a modern-day poll tax? And my friends on the other side are saying that race is not an issue here? I'm going to continue with facts because I was flabbergasted that someone could stand up here and say there's not a different experience for blacks and whites from voting. I'm just going to continue to read the facts. Since Shelby v. Holder, that eviscerated the Voting Rights Act that people like Goodman, Cheney, and Schwerner died for, black voters in Georgia have faced disproportionately longer lines and fewer polling places. The average number of voters per polling place have grown 40% in diverse Atlanta metro since 2012, and voters in black neighborhoods waited nearly 10 times as long on average after polling places were closed in neighborhoods. I'm looking for amen from my colleague from Georgia. I mean, in what country are we where a certain minority in predominantly minority communities has to wait 10 times as long? And so when you read, and I've heard my colleagues read these laws, they read, well, what's wrong with having no drop boxes because, hey, we didn't have them before the pandemic. What's wrong with not having that many days to vote by mail? What's wrong with these things is obvious because they're not designed for voter protection. They're not designed to help voters have more access to the polls. They are designed to suppress the vote and create these longer lines. That is the obvious result. And if you can't see that, I'm flabbergasted. I'm sorry, it's hard. This is not my turn to speak, and forgive me to my colleagues, but I am flabbergasted that the Republican Party, the party of the 14th Amendment, the party that once fought for equal access to the polls, is now creating this ruse that every 19 states, that the states that are passing these laws, 19 states, this is not about voter protection. Donald Trump's own person said this, the last election was the safest, most secure election in American history. This is not about in-person voter fraud. Study after study has shown that you're more likely to be struck by lightning. This is about lies. I'm sorry, this is about lies, and they're targeting groups. I'm going to go on with the facts, but I just want to talk about students for a second. I heard Senator John Tester. I've heard my colleagues from New Hampshire. And they're not hiding the ball, folks. They're not trying to tell us, oh, we're concerned about it. As early as 2011, state Republican House Speaker at the time in New Hampshire, Senators, you know William O'Brien? Can I get a hallelujah there? Promised to clamp down on unrestricted voting by students, calling them kids voting liberal, voting their feelings with no life experience. I hear what you're saying, that this is, these laws are innocuous on their face. But if you start looking at the legislative record, you see groups are being targeted in this country. Polling places are diminishing on college campuses. Voter IDs laws are being created so complex in Midwestern states that they're saying you can't use a 4-year ID, it's got to be a 2-year ID. That's some of the laws that are being passed. Can somebody be a witness on that? And I hear this rhetoric where people pull out one law. Well, look at this law. This is just about shrinking the days, or this is so innocuous on its face. And I know there are people at home thinking to myself, hey, that doesn't sound like a big deal. Maybe Republicans have a point. No, let's return to the facts. I'm going to go to Texas because I heard the senator from Texas accuse this body of creating rhetoric that was divisive. You want to know what's divisive to a country that says e pluribus unum above where the presiding person is? You know what I know what's divisive? Is telling people in the Congresswoman's state that if you live in a predominantly minority area, we're going to remove polling places and change laws so that black folks disproportionately are waiting 5, 10, 15 times longer.
More after this.
Have you been looking for a podcast that takes you beyond the headlines? A show that challenges you. A show that's real, raw, and unapologetic. Then you've found your new home. Right, left, and center.
Right, left, and center.
News, the environment, immigration, politics, the criminal justice system, and everything in between. Join Will Jackson every week, your personal guide to understand the week's news, the world, and how America shapes it. Listen everywhere podcasts are available. You're listening to Left, Right, and Center, your audio guide to help you understand the week's news, the world, and how America shapes it. Now, back to your host, Will Jackson.
Facts. The burden of long lines in polling places closures in Texas, in the post-Shelby County area often falls disproportionately on black and Latino voters. Congresswoman, of the approximately 750 sites Texas has closed since Shelby v. Holder, 542 were in the 50 counties with the fastest growing black and Latino populations. Don't lecture me about Jim Crow. I know this is not 1965. That's what makes me so outraged. It's 2022. And they're blatantly removing more polling places from the counties where black and Latinos are overrepresented. I'm not making that up. That is a fact. I'm not going to stop because I'm tired of hearing that this does not have to do about singling out certain populations in our country, students, Native Americans, and not others. I'm not accusing anybody. Please, let's not throw around the defense where we crouch into defensive postures. I'm not accusing anybody of being racist. I'm just speaking to the facts in our country that I know motivate everybody here. 99 of my colleagues know it is wrong to create barriers for some populations and not others under the guise of a lie that there's a voter security problem. Let me continue. I'm sorry, Congresswoman, to keep talking about Texas. In the presidential primary on March 3rd, voters at the historically black Texas Southern University in Houston waited not an hour, not 2 hours, not 3, 4, 5, waited 6 hours. A poll of Texas voters conducted just in 2020 election underscored the disparity of non-white voters facing casting their ballots. I'm sorry, Senator Kaine, you were very good when you talked about that sign of 98% of people happy. I sat here stunned. I was wondering who they were polling, because they were not polling black and Latino voters in Texas when they did that. Let me give you the facts. 48% of black voters and 55% of Latino voters in Texas found it easy to vote. But that leaves a lot of folks that didn't think it was easy. White voters, actually 65% think it's easy to vote. Everybody's not happy. People who wait in 6-hour lines are not happy. I just want to give a couple more facts. Let's go to my dad's home state. North Carolina was one of the states most affected by poll closures. There were 158 fewer polling places in 40 counties with large black communities. And African American voter participation dropped 16%. Why? Well, my friend Bennett said this. We still live in a country where the economic disparities between blacks and whites is what it was in the 1960s. And so if you're a black struggling family and your option to vote means standing in line for 10 hours compared to predominantly white counties where the wait is longer, you don't go vote. And that's not just black folks. The stories about disabled voters, with about 1 in 7 or 1 in 8 pointing out that it's hard for them to vote because of physical impediments, that's discriminatory against them. It doesn't mean people here are anti-disabled. We're not throwing those labels around. I'm just talking about the facts. And so I just want my colleagues to know that I can pull story after story of these states, the 19 that are passing these laws. If you pull them out and want to read them absent context, you're going to try to obscure the larger picture that's going on in our nation, is that we are seeing entirely Republican legislatures entirely Republican legislators passing laws that are disproportionately impacting certain groups by the facts. And so I want to close with this because I love what, on the march across the Edmund Pettit Bridge, they were stopped, beaten back. They tried to go again with King, again blocked by Alabama state troopers, but they finally got to their destination to protest voting rights. And I love what King said there. He talked about those people whose hearts were discouraged because they hadn't passed voting rights. And I know there's going to be a lot of people in this day that are going to feel that kind of discouragement. But Reverend Warnock, King gave one of his best speeches that day, where he asked people, how long are we going to have to wait? Not long. Because the truth, I'm thinking about the lies we're hearing now, the big lies, the lies of in-person voting, where the truth crushed to the earth will rise again. Don't lie and say there's not a disparate voting reality for blacks and whites in this country right now. The facts speak differently. Don't lie and say that these laws are not being done in a way to make it harder for students to vote. Don't lie and say that we are a nation that should be doing more to ease access as opposed to putting up more barriers, because to go on more barriers is anti-democratic. Those lies will not live forever. I do believe still that the arc of the moral universe is long and it bends till justice. I still believe that the best of our democracy will come out if people do not give up and are not discouraged. I ask my colleagues right now to continue on the floor today, to continue to tell the truth of what's happening in your states, to continue telling the truth of what's happening in our nation. Because we will win this fight. I don't know how long it will take, but that will be determined by how dedicated we are to the principles of this democracy. We must live in a nation where everyone is equal, not in rhetoric or in slogan or in salutes, but everyone is equal in the experience they have through participating in democracy. The vote is the bedrock of our nation, is the foundation of the country, and it does have cracks that need our repair. Whether we get down on our knees in prayer or we stand tall, let's continue the work of this democracy so that freedom and justice does roll down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. Forgive my colleagues for speaking well beyond my time, and I apologize if I demonstrated too much emotion.
You know, and so this is why everyone needs to get a hold of their senator and their congressional member that represents their area to fight really hard to get these voting rights, federal voting rights, passed into law, because 2024 is very essential to the way we move forward as a country. We need to get rid of, we need to start doing some impeachments. We need to take, as Democrats or progressives, we need to actually take care of the House. We need to take care of the Senate. And we need to hold account Supreme Court members who are bending the will of the Constitution to meet their personal agenda. They're not there to, and I'm not a law scholar. I mean, I do a lot of reading. I'm not a law scholar. But the Supreme Court is there to actually really hold the form of what the constitutional standards are. They're not doing that. Instead, they're taking luxury trips by billionaires who have this innate ability to have a business before the court or coming up before the court, and you know they're taking people and just flying them all over the damn place. Or I shouldn't say people. I should just say like Supreme Court justices, certain two Supreme Court justices that should be removed, impeached. There are a lot of folks that are in positions of power that simply needs to be impeached. More after this.
You're listening to Left, Right, and Center, your audio guide to help you understand the week's news, the world, and how America shapes it. Now, back to your host, Will Jackson.
Get the fuck out of here, bitch. Oh, man. You know what? I'm sorry. I gotta do this again.
Get the fuck out of here, bitch! Woo!
Oh, my God. Okay, so speaking of voters and constitutions, Iowa, you're now on my radar. Why? Because this dumbass woman in Iowa decided to question Mike Pence's constitutional duties, and apparently she doesn't even know her own fucking constitution and what the vice president has to do. And so here's in Iowa, if you know this bitch, you tell her to go to the fucking library and look it up, because you look real fucking dumb on TV. You can't clean it up. And now we understand what kind of Iowa voters that are out there. And she's actually making you guys look bad. I'm just saying. I'm keeping it real. That's what I do. She making you folks in Iowa look dumb as fuck. I mean, listen, if you miss what she said, I'll play it for you. Here you go.
If it wasn't for your vote, we would not have Joe Biden in the White House.
Right.
Joe Biden shouldn't be there. And all those wonderful things that you and Trump were doing together would be continuing, and this country would be on the right path. Do you ever second guess yourself? That was a constitutional right that you had to send those votes back to the states. It was not like you were going to personally elect him. We all know by the number of votes that were there who won that election.
See, once again, ill-informed white folk in Iowa who are Trump supporters. And if you're a Trump supporter, you've heard me say this time and time again, you're dumb as fuck. You don't know the laws. You refuse to read. And you take whatever the orange man says to be fact. You're dumb as fuck. So why continue to be that fucking dumb and made to look this damn stupid?
You changed history for this country.
Yeah, let me speak to the issue, because I think it's an issue that continues to be misunderstood. I know by God's grace I did exactly what the Constitution of the United States required of me that day. I kept my oath. Let me be very respectful of the question and tell you, look, states conduct our elections. You never want to let Washington, D.C. run elections. You certainly would never want one person in Washington, D.C. to decide who the President of the United States is.
You weren't deciding. You were just sending it back to the states.
Ma'am, let me explain it to you. States conduct elections. Iowa, where I live in Indiana. And after there were questions in a half a dozen or so states, we had reviews of the results, 60 different lawsuits that went to the courts. Where there are questions, there's two ways that they're reviewed. Number one is you take those issues to the legal process in the state for recount. Okay? Secondly, you take them to the courts, which we did very aggressively. Now, there were voting irregularities that took place. You had a half a dozen states that changed the rules in the name of COVID, but the courts upheld those changes in virtually every instance. and in every instance where they would have had any impact whatsoever. At the end of the day, when Iowa certified your results and sent them to Washington, D.C., when Indiana certified our results, the Constitution of the United States, in Article 2, says the job of the Vice President is to serve as the presiding officer of a joint session where you open and count the votes.
Are you stupid or something? I'm as stupid as a stupid does.
Are you crazy or just plain stupid?
Stupid as stupid does, Mrs. Blue.
I guess.
Are you stupid or something?
Stupid as stupid does, sir.
Have you been looking for a podcast that takes you beyond the headlines? A show that challenges you? A show that's real? Have you been looking for a podcast that takes you beyond the headlines? A show that challenges you? A show that's real, right, raw, left and center, unapologetic.
Left and center.
News, the environment, immigration, politics, the criminal justice system, and everything in between. Join Will Jackson every week, your personal guide to understand the week's news, the world, and how America shapes it. Listen everywhere podcasts are available. You're listening to Left, Right, and Center, your audio guide to help you understand the week's news, the world, and how America shapes it. Now, back to your host, Will Jackson.
Oh, here we go. Here we go. I got mine. I hope you got yours. So, I want to talk about gun violence, and here's the reason why. I'm going to tie it into that orange guy, that fuckhead Trump. And oh, by the way, let me take a step back. I'm sick and tired of all you fucking Republicans out there who don't give the respect to the presidency by calling Joe Biden instead of saying President Joe Biden. You don't have to like him. You just simply have to give the office some fucking respect. And you fuckers out there who are not doing that, you're a piece of shit, just like Trump. Now, not all Republicans. Now, keep in mind, I've already said that if Liz Cheney throws her hat in the ring, I'm voting for Liz Cheney. I love me some Liz Cheney. And you can go back to all my episodes and you'll know that I'm that guy who was a big John McCain fan, a big Liz Cheney fan, a big President Bush fan, Sr., Cory Booker fan, Jamie Raskins fan. I mean, the list goes on. And the bottom line is that the fucking Republicans today need to, especially the MAGA, needs to start showing a little bit of respect to the office. It's no different when I was in the service. I may not respect my senior officer, but I respected that uniform. That's it. I didn't have to respect the man. I respected the uniform. That uniform that man wore or that woman wore was more important to me than anything else. Now, Trump is not respecting the Biden presidency. He's not respecting the rule of law. He's gotten on his whatever you call Truth Social or whatever, and started threatening the FBI agents and the prosecutors that are out there, federal prosecutors that are out there. And so what happens is these whack jobs come out of the woodwork. They're all Trumpers, white supremacists, and they don't know how to think for themselves because they're just that fucking dumb. And they go out and they commit these atrocities and these crimes, and they put threats on people's lives. And then when they lose their livelihood by their monkey asses going to jail, then they turn around and say, well, you know what? My president told me to do so. No, bitch, your president is about to go to jail. And not only that, you are going to jail, and he's not paying for your attorney fees, and he's not going to take care of your family while you're doing a bid in a 5x6 or 5x7. And oh, by the way, unlike Marjorie Taylor Greene says that there's political prisoners and went to D.C., you know, there are no political prisoners. They are fucking insurrectionists. They're criminals, and they need to serve the time as such. So when I talk about gun violence, and I've mentioned this before, I did an episode on this before, we all need to understand that the gun violence that is taking place and the gun violence that happens is because state and federal legislation is not properly taking care of business. Okay? We need laws that help protect. We need these red flag laws in place, especially like states in the state of Ohio, like my state. And see, here's a problem I have with my state, along with other states. And I've said this before, and I'll give credit when credit is due. One of my number one listeners, Aaron L., mentioned this, is that everyone in the state of Ohio, in order for you to get a firearm, you must pay for a 1 week class. That means you have to attend a week-long class, and during that week-long class, you have to pass a psychological test provided by the state, which you have to pay for in order for you to purchase a firearm. Meaning, you can go to any gun shop or gun store and retail store and purchase a firearm, but you cannot get that firearm that day. That means you have to show proof that you not only passed the psychological piece, but you also passed the test itself. You have to pass both, not one or the other, both, in order to be a gun owner. See, all this, well, you know what? If you're not a convicted felon, everyone can own a gun. No, fuck that. It doesn't work that way. How's that working out? Because, see, now because of that, I carry Lucy no matter where I go. Why? Because it's dangerous. I can be in a Walmart, or I can be in a Target, or I can be walking down the street or driving down the street, and one of these Trumpers or these radical right will come out of the woodwork with their own political views and start shooting up shit. I want to be in a position where I'm defending myself because I got grandchildren I need to pay attention to. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I hope you see it the way I see it. There are laws that need to be that needs to be in place. You know that 78% of Americans want gun laws because of all these mass shootings? I guarantee you, if one of these politicians' family members was shot by a mass shooter, I guarantee you they'll start lobbying gun laws. But because it's not happening to them and their families, they don't give a flying fuck. Just saying. See, you know, this year alone, in 2023, between the ages of 12 and 17. And this is a total combined. This is teenagers between the age of 12 and 17. 792. And this is according to Gun Archive. You can go look it up. 792 children or teenagers have been shot or injured because of guns. That's not alarming? Well, let's talk about mass shootings. This year, 420 mass shootings. 1,530 people were injured. Suspects killed, 17. Suspects injured, 15. Suspects arrested, 208. Everybody don't need a fucking gun or a firearm or a weapon. And not only that, we need to have laws on what's that called? Buck stops, or actually stock buck laws, where, you know, you have these military style weapons that are out there. Don't need to have these. Why? And I've said this before, only people that are in law enforcement on the SRT teams, not police officer, SRT teams, or the military needs to have these firearms. No one else. No one else. Here's something that, you know, I was looking at for the month of July. We had, for the month of July so far, we had 25 mass shootings, 157 injured. This is for the month of July. 1 suspect killed, 2 suspects injured, and 8 suspects arrested. You want to know the states? Indiana, Texas, Illinois, Ohio, Florida, Michigan, Maryland, Massachusetts, District of Columbia, New Jersey, California, Louisiana, North Carolina, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, Texas. Did I say Indiana? Yeah, I did say Indiana. Missouri, New York, Kansas, Oklahoma. That is too many mass shootings, and we are only on the 8th of this month. That's too many. That's too many lives. And I don't understand, what is it going to take to fix this? I don't know. If your heart is not broken, my heart is broken for you. Final words right after this.
You're listening to Left, Right, and Center, your audio guide to help you understand the week's news, the world, and how America shapes it. Now, back to your host, Will Jackson.
All right, folks, we're going to wrap this up because there's, and here's the conservative side of me, as I mentioned before. And this message goes out to asylum seekers who are coming to the United States. You need to actually follow the correct process and stop forcing our federal government to actually put you in sanctuary cities and drain the resources for that city or that state. Portland, Oregon is going, I think they have like 300 individuals who are asylum seekers who are, I think it's August 16th is their last day where they will be housed. And not only that, they're complaining about living conditions, which more than likely is better than the living conditions in their previous country. And what's happening is that these asylum seekers don't understand that they are draining the pockets of the folks that, and I, you know what? I get it. I understand we need to be those Americans who are going to do what we are America. We need to do what other countries will not do. And we are the home of the free and the land of the brave. But you're asking too much of us, people who are seeking asylum, because you're draining our local resources, our local taxes, our state taxes, our federal taxes to bring you into this country and allow you to live. And I get it. You want to work. But guess what? We have our own situations going on. And I'm going to get a little critical of you folks that are asylum seekers. I have fellow vets that are out there right now that are fucking homeless. So instead of all the dedication and resources that are going to my fellow vets that are homeless, who needs to pay their mortgage or who needs some type of care whatsoever, it's those resources are being funneled towards you. I'm a firm believer that, karma comes to you when it needs to come to you. And I think that we here in the United States have done enough for the world. And the world needs to allow us to take care of our people here at home. We've got vets that are homeless. We got people living on the streets. We got children that are runaways that need help. We have elderly that need specific care, and the list goes on and on. And you think that our country is that damn wealthy that you can come into our country where our veterans and our taxpayers, this is the conservative side of me. Okay? I don't mind helping, but damn it, I think we've helped too much. Until next week, knuckleheads.
You've been listening to Right, Left, and Center. Our passion is to talk about today's news, politics, the environment, culture, and anything else that helps shape the news in America. Our 2022 season was so strong, we had to come back and smack 2023 right in the mouth. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And continue to listen on iHeartRadio, Spotify, or anywhere you download your podcasts. See you next time on Right, Left, and Center.